Hey everybody, it's Rob. We're back. We're doing another Proving Grounds practice machine. This time we're doing a machine called Cobbles. It's a Linux machine and it's rated as easy. Of course, I didn't think it was that easy, but that's just my opinion. So without further ado, you can see I'm on Offsec VPN and I have Cobbles spun up. Now, first thing we did is ran an mmap scan. The only thing that came back were 22 and 80. And 80 is running an Apache web server with Cobbles. So we'll have to see what that is. So the next thing I did, obviously, was open up the web page. I looked at the source, nothing. Tried some, obvious admin password, admin, all that kind of good stuff. No go. So did some go busting, which is what you should do when you come across a website. And I saw a couple of things. There's this JavaScript directory. I tried to monkey around with that. No luck. I wasn't able to find anything. I did some further go busting on that directory. I even looked for files to see if there were any files in there. Nothing that I could do anything with. Now, the one thing I don't see a lot is the server status with a status of 200. It's usually another status. So I said, let's go take a look at that. And if we look at the Apache status, it looks like there's some proxy action going on here, okay? Because it's on port 8080 and it's on the local host. And obviously we're not connecting to port 8080 and we're not connecting to the local host. We're connecting to the web server proxy, which is what, my assumption is this is. It's some kind of proxy. Now, the thing to pay attention to here is you see all these GET requests to the ZM prod. Now that's kind of a unique directory, so maybe it wasn't in that word list we used. So let's go there and see what happens. And exactly what happens is it takes you to this Zoneminder software, which I've never heard of, never used it. I didn't mess around with it too much. I immediately took the version, tried to find something in Searchploit, which was a no-go, and then took to the internet and I found this exploit in Cross the Knolls GitHub, and it is for Zoneminder 1.36.12 and lower. And actually, I think it'll go up to 137. So I gave it a shot. So there's a couple of things about this code. It uses requests, which means Python virtual environment. Line 18 includes a payload where you're going to have to adjust the IP address and the port, and then it has several arguments that you got to worry about. So what we're going to do, you just click the download button here, which I've already done. Go to the folder that you downloaded it into, and we're going to first open it up with mousepad. Make sure you change the payload, right? And one thing to be aware of on this machine in particular, I noticed that traffic was kind of limited to port 80. I tried to use a couple of other ports for listeners, and it didn't seem to work. I don't know if it was just me or what was going on, but I did everything over port 80 on this machine. Okay, so save that, get out of there, open a terminal here. I might have already created a Python virtual environment, but I'll do it again for you. Python venv for the module, .venv for the name. We hit enter, and now we need to install requests, at least, because we saw that and we're familiar with it. So pip install requests. Okay. So requests is installed. So let's clear the screen and let's run this exploit. And here's what you have to do. It has a couple of arguments that are important. We're running it in our Python virtual environment. The R host is the machine we're attacking. The R port is the port that we're attacking. It's running on 80. The URI is the destination portion of the URL. So it's ZM prod, okay? So the first thing we got to do here before we hit enter is we have to start a listener. Netcat NLVP on 80, and then we'll come back to our exploit and we'll hit enter. Okay, check your netcat. All right, we got a shell. Now, this shell is a bit of a pain in the butt. A lot of commands don't work. So I had to make do with what I had. I suppose you could try and upgrade the shell with a Python payload or something like that, but I didn't bother. First, we're going to go to CD home. We're going to do an ls. You see there's a directory for Isaac, so we're going to cd into Isaac. We're going to do an ls, and we're going to cat local.txt. So there's the user flag. So now we're going to go back to that directory we were in, user share Zoneminder www, which is a weird directory to have a website in, I'll be honest with you. So if we do an ls, we can see that's what we have, right? Tried all the normal Linux enumeration. Sudo wouldn't work. No history. No files with the setuid set, all of that kind of good stuff. So I was curious about this proxy stuff. So the first thing I did was I ran a netstat. I hope it's going to allow me to do it. Netstat ANO. Okay, let's see if we can do the same thing and maybe just grep on listening. Listen. So netstat ANO grep listen. Okay, that's a little cleaner. Okay, so there's some really valuable information here from what I can see. So we know about port 80, we know about port 8080, and now there's a port 8081. So this leads me to believe that there's a backup and a failover, or there's a proxy and a failover. I'm not sure of the configuration. But if you look, you can see that there's some streams listening, and there's this HA proxy. So I'm wondering if there's a HA proxy config file somewhere. I don't see it here. My guess would be it'll be in the etc directory. So let's take a look there. ls, and let's do HA proxy star. Yeah, there's a config file there. So let's see if we can cat it. HA proxy .cfg. No such file or directory. So cat etc. I don't know why it wants the full path, but HA proxy .cfg. Oh, there's no cat. Let me see if I can really quick find my notes to upgrade my shell. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Let's see if we can spawn a better shell. Copy. Paste. All right. Let's see. Cat HA proxy .cfg. Am I spelling that right? Yeah. Okay, let's see. Which VI? Okay. VI HA proxy .cfg. It's a new file. I must be being a dummy and being in the wrong directory is the only thing I can figure. Escape, quit, PWP, ls, AIL. Oh, there's a fault. I am a dummy. CD HA proxy. What a dummy. Okay, ls. There's the proxy.config. Okay, so let's do that. Cat HA proxy. That's why I love you guys. You're very understanding when I'm a moron. All right. Okay, so here we go. So now we can see that it expects a 200, and if it doesn't get a 200, it looks like it moves to the backup, and it'll keep checking. So let's see something. We go here. Is this still available? No. Is this still available? It is. So now it must be running on the backup. So what we're going to try and do is run the exploit again and see what happens. So we'll open up a new window. We'll do a netcat NLVP 80 again. We'll come back here, open a new terminal, and then we'll copy our exploit again. See what happens. Paste. All right. check your netcat. Okay. So let's minimize that. Let's minimize that. And we have a root shell, but that looks weird. Let's see here. Do some arranging. All right, so if we go back, see here, user share Zoneminder ls. Okay. Here, it looks like we're in the same directory, and this is a root shell. Let's see what the host name is. It's a number, which to me means it's, let's look in the root, see, ls, ail. Yep. So this must be the Docker proxy that we're connected to right now. Okay, so let's go back to that folder we were in, because that looks remarkably like the one over here. So Zoneminder www. Okay, ls. Yeah, we have the same files, it looks like, in both robots.txt. Yes. Let's come over here and let's do a mount. See what's going on here. So we're looking SD1. Yep. SD1 is actually, dev SD1 A1 is actually mounted to the home file system. So I thought I was brilliant, and I said, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to copy. Well, let's do this. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So in case you don't understand what's happening, this window over here is a Docker instance, the proxy, and this is the actual machine. We're in the same, it looks like the same directory, and the same files are in there, right? So if I do an ls again, you can see it's pretty much the same, right? Let's do a test. We'll do touch test.txt. Now we'll do an ls. We have test.txt. If we come over here, we do an ls. We have test.txt. So these definitely are mapped. So I was brilliant, I thought, and I said, well, I'm going to copy bin bash to user share Zoneminder www bash. Okay, now if we do an ls, bash is there. Now if we do an ls ail, the key part of that is this bash is owned by root. So I said, well, let's set the UID. We'll do something like chmod plus s on bash. Right? So now if we do an LSAIL, you can see that the set UID is set, okay, by that S. So I said, well, that's great. I'll just come over here, do an LSAIL, and you can see it says root, and it's the set UID is set. So I'll just run bash, right, from this directory. And unfortunately, it gives you a regular shell, which I'm not sure I understood, okay? It took me a while to go do some searching on Google, and remarkably, I didn't see a whole lot on Google. So what I ended up doing was go into the bash man page. And the way that the bash executable or binary works is if the shell is started with the effective user group ID equal to the real user, which would be us in this case on that machine, and the P option is not supplied, no startup files are read, shell functions are not inherited from the environment, the shell ops, bash ops, CD path, and globe ignore variables, if they appear in the environment, are also ignored, and the effective user ID is set to the real user ID. If the P option is supplied at invocation, the startup behavior is the same, but the effective user ID is not reset. So what's happening is, in simple terms, I believe, at least I'm going to try and explain it in simple terms. So let me pull up these two windows again. What's happening is the default behavior of bash is to run at my user ID, okay, which is not root. And I'm not 100% sure I understand why in this case that is the case. But it's set, when I run this bash command, it effectively runs as me. Okay, because it takes the permissions and the environment from me and executes it. When you do this, like if I exit this shell and I'm back at this root, right, and I do lsail, and we execute bash, if we execute bash with the tacp option, it runs with the effective ID. The effective ID is not changed to me. It remains what it is, which is root. I hope that's clear. So basically, without the P, it runs as me. With the P, it runs as the effective ID of the binary that's there, which is root. Okay, so we'll put the P in here, and we get a root shell. Kind of crazy, I know. Some of you may discover this by accident. When I did this machine the second time, before I did anything else, I was still trying to get through the whole process and figure out how it worked. I lost my shell by hitting Control-C at the wrong time, and the next time I connected, I got this root shell, and I was like, what in the heck just happened? And that's when I figured out this whole proxy thing. And after you run the exploit the first time, it fails over to the actual proxy, which is the Docker instance. So pretty convoluted, but you can totally find this by accident as well. So let's go to the root directory. We'll do an ls, and we'll cat proof.txt. And I'll blur that out. So this machine was a pain in the butt. I'm going to be honest with you. It took me a long time. We, ran an mmap scan. We saw 80 was open. It was running some software called Cobbles. I tried, all kinds of username, password combinations, nothing in the source. Did some go busting. Saw the server status page was a 200, so went there. Saw that there was some kind of proxy action going on. Okay. Also saw there was a lot of polls or GET requests to this zm-tac prod URI. So we tacked that onto the IP address, and it took us to Zoneminder. We found an exploit for Zoneminder. We ran it. We were able to get a shell. Did some exploration inside of the machine. It was really kind of limited what we were able to do. Did a netstack command and saw that there were some processes called proxy that was running. And that 80, 80, 80, and 80, 81 seem to all be serving up web pages. And that by looking at that proxy config file that we found, we were able to see that there was basically a proxy with failover in place. So because we had kind of taken out the first server with the exploit, the thought was to exploit again to connect to the second server. And when we connected to the second server, it was the Docker instance. The Docker instance had its file system mounted to the host's file system. So essentially, they were able to just drop files back and forth between each other, which is terrible. The whole point of containers is to isolate the host from the container. And what I did was I copied bash over, set the UID on it, and then copied it to the directory that was on the host file system. Went over to the host file system, thought I was brilliant, tried to run bash, and it did not work. Had to use the tacp flag in order for it to use the effective permission of the binary and not my effective UID, etc., and all that. I'm going to put links to the Linux man page and link below, along with the exploit and all the other links I used. So it was a hairy machine. It took me quite a while to get through, but it was fun. And of course, you always learn stuff when you do these things. So all the links will be in the description below. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, drop them below. I'll be happy to chat with you. I hope you found this video useful. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.